Today I had the pleasure of talking about 4 myths as it relates to 2 different critical talent segments, namely millennials and women in leadership. So I talked about those 4 myths and debunked them, I think, and gave folks some insights around how they should be addressing those 2 critical talent segments in particular. So you've asked me whether millennials are actually often overlooked as future leadership talent. I disagree with that question. In fact, millennials are a segment of the population that's increasingly looked at as future leadership capability, not only because statistically they're one of the largest groups and growing in our population, but also because they're bringing new skills and insights to the table that we need for the future. So why is it important to recognize the value that millennials bring? I mean, it's important on a number of dimensions. I've just mentioned the statistical reality of the fact that this is the largest and growing generation in the workforce today. So increasingly, they are the pool of talent that we will have to draw from, both for manager and leadership ranks. So it's important for us to do what we can to ensure that we're creating a value proposition that's compelling for that group. And then you asked, how can we make that value proposition compelling? I went through a couple of insights today that would help there. For example, there's a common conception that millennials are collaborative, and that we should in fact be building collaborative workspaces and changing the environment in which they work to make it more compelling. But actually our data says that's not the case. Millennials are in fact quite competitive on a relative basis. So instead of changing your entire layout of your office, for example, you might be better served by looking at ways to give visibility into competitive opportunities and performance outcomes between millennials. I think we can create a collaborative workplace for people of all ages by taking a step back and looking at the role collaboration plays today in driving performance. And in fact, our latest research on this shows that 50% of the contributions that people make to driving business outcomes today actually come through the work they do with and through others. So essentially really enabling all employees at all ages to contribute to the success of others, to leverage others to drive their own success. That kind of collaborative activity is actually not only what will drive an engaging place to work, but actually will drive better business outcomes for our companies as well. My top tips for HR directors as they're thinking about engaging segments of interest to them, millennials, women in leadership positions, any other number of critical talent segments as well, digital skills, for example, being one we're hearing a lot about right now, would be to understand whether or not there is in fact a different value proposition for that segment, and if so, to build their value proposition specifically to address those needs and interests in those different parts of the population. We've done some interesting work on branding for influence, and I think what a lot of companies do is actually go out with a message around how appealing it is to work for them, how great it is, how they're an employer of choice, and so on. And that's not very differentiated, but these critical talent segments actually require some differentiation. So it becomes important to understand that particular segment, to understand what drives them, what motivates them, and then to ensure you're differentiating your value proposition, your environment, and your offerings to make it a compelling place for them to work. So I've really enjoyed today's conference. The best thing about it so far, I think, has been the huge number of organizations represented, the opportunity we all have to network and talk to each other and share best practice. I've really enjoyed meeting colleagues that I haven't seen in quite a while, as well as meeting new colleagues and peers from other organizations. So that's been, I think, one of the greatest things for me about this.